All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Most podcast. Taping this on a Thursday afternoon. First timer in the building. Stephen Rummage is here. Stephen, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Chase, man, it's an honor, man. Thank you for bringing me on. I'm good talking sports, man. Any kind of sports we can talk, and obviously I love talking to cards too. So it'll be a good time, man.
Absolutely, because I am. We have some card stuff. Obviously, BHH, who we'll talk about in a second. Moving on from Tennessee to Louisville. That is a killer shirt, though. I like the vintage Louisville look.
They have everything around here now is moving back to that era.
Yeah.
Duncan Cardinal. We're kind of going through a little bit of a renaissance with that.
There you go. I mean, hey, like it's better. Like when you look at, is it Home Field who does all the old school
Yeah,
logos and stuff? Yeah. Like you look at all of that and you're like, what are we doing? Like
I
we
know.
overthink logos in these schools. So they go back and it's just, I had a Pitt reporter on yesterday and then I just went down a Pitt logo rabbit hole and their first old one is just fantastic where you're like, we've just gotten progressively worse. If you just keep adding more logos, chances are it's probably worse than what folks have been doing
moving,
beforehand.
we're moving closer to the XFL than good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. Well, y'all have got a permanent AD now. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it was I don't know if people knew kind of how contentious it got
Yeah.
at times. Obviously, Tom Jurich used to be the AD here.
Great book on that era with him and Patino.
Yeah,
One of my favorite books I read during the pandemic. Yeah. Crazy times.
yeah, and there was a little bit of a uprising to kind of bring him back. It never really was on the table, I don't think.
Mm.
So we got Josh Hurd, and so far so good. So we'll see kind of how it pans out. But he's, when you hire, he was able to hire the basketball coach, which at the
Mm.
University of Louisville is a big deal, for us. So when he made the hire, and he made the hire that people wanted, he won a lot of goodwill, there.
So Kenny was the overwhelming favorite for fans. Is that's who they wanted?
Big time, big
Okay.
time. Really him. And man, there was at the very start, you kind of heard Bruce Pearl was kind of like somebody that were like, man, can we get Bruce Pearl from Auburn? We don't even know, where. But it was pretty much Kenny Payne the whole time.
That's interesting. Did you think you would get Kenny Payne? Like, did you think that he would actually make that choice to come to Louisville and he would move on from the bench in the NBA and not wait it out on that front? Did you think that would actually be what ended up happening, even though that's what fans wanted?
Sure. I mean, there's Louisville's the type of community. I mean, I think Knoxville's kind of a lot like it, where the alumni base, there's a lot there, and they talk a lot.
Yes.
So it's you kind of knew that there were, hey, Kenny wants the job. Kenny wants the job. I think the bigger thing was Louisville fans didn't realize. I think in our mind, we were like, go get Kenny and let's get it done. I think Louisville fans realized how hard it was to get that contract and everything worked out. I mean, he was leaving the Knicks mid-season. Yep. And I mean, it's kind of ironic because we spent years screaming at William Wesley and World Wide West and different things. And it was like, that's his guys. And he had to leave them. And so there was a lot more there. But I do think for him in his mind that it was like, I have to take it. It just has to work out, So more along the schematics of it to get him here as opposed to him wanting it.
Was part of the holdup too, because it's interesting with like Patino and Mack. It's just Payne's extremely different in that Mack was he was successful. Like no one thought, and we'll talk about Mack in a second, but Mack and Patino came in with this high pedigree of actual head coaching experience. Kenny Payne is just someone that you're assuming is going to be a great head coach. He has obviously been an assistant for a really long time, great recruiter, that kind of thing. Players love him. But you've also never seen him be a head coach. That's never happened. And this is a big job with a community that loves basketball. And because of him being kind of the fan favorite, is there some nervousness there where it's like, this is a big job and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him right away to get this thing steered in the right direction because Cal's not going anywhere and this Kentucky program's not going anywhere. And he jumps right into the Wagner sweepstakes. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Is that a area of concern for you and fans that this is his first head coaching job?
I think so to an extent.
Mhm.
There is something, and I know I keep kind of referencing Tennessee. I think
Mm.
there's
Nothing wrong with that on this
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, right. Okay, yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where being one of us
Mhm.
kind of trumps that worry, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Where I think if he wasn't a card,
Mhm.
family, it's like there's no way
Yeah.
people have lost their minds. Get hired an assistant coach for the Louisville Bat. Now Louisville football, we know where we stand in the pecking order there. It's
Mhm.
a little more of like, hey, we don't have a seat at the table. We're trying to. Basketball's a little different, and it was
Mhm.
with him though, he's a member of the family. And in this community, that's a big, big deal. To be a former guy, I mean, even up,
Mhm.
I mean, I know we're talking basketball right now, but I mean, you can't go anywhere without somebody saying, hey man, Satterfield don't win 6, 7 games. We got to get Jeff Brom. Like we got to get Jeff Brom, and
Mhm.
that's a constant conversation here.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I do think there's a little bit of that. Now, his time at Kentucky, obviously, I mean, he was associate head coach,
Mhm.
done a lot there. Going to the Knicks, I think he does at least have enough of a resume that calms your nerves a touch,
Mhm.
and the players he's produced and the different stuff. But if we're 2 years in, 3 years in, and it's like, oh man, we're bubble team,
Mhm.
there will be more of that talk. I think right now though, it's just kind of getting pushed to the side, and there's just almost trust, blinded trust. Like, hey man, we trust him. Let's see what he can do.
When you look at his coaching staff, do you feel like that it's a pretty solid staff? Because that's another part of it is just that like if you're a first time head coach, you got to surround yourself with the right staff to get this thing humming. Do you think the staff around Kenny that was assembled is a pretty solid, good staff?
Yeah, I love the staff, and it's one of those deals where Nolan Smith was
Yeah.
another legacy guy here, with his dad Derek, and
Hmm.
some people really like that hire. It's funny, the Danny Manning was never mentioned. Like
Yeah.
Nolan, this name came up a lot. You're like, yeah, you're probably getting Nolan. Even Josh Jameson from Oregon,
Hmm.
kind of had come up because you knew there was a connection there. But Danny Manning, we were on the air,
Hmm.
and we got an email, and it was like, hey, there's a press conference today at 1 o'clock, a staff edition. Everybody was like, well, who's this?
Hmm.
And I know you said we'll talk about it in a minute, but Milt
Yeah.
Wagner, former Louisville card, had been
Yes.
kind of rumored. You were like, well, maybe this is Milt.
Hmm.
Nobody knows. And you show up, even showing up to the press conference. It was, I think Rothstein had a tweet
Hmm.
5 minutes before the press conference started. It's like, hey, Danny Manning's going to be the hire. And Kenny himself said he just didn't know it was an option. And I guess Danny Manning gave him a ring, and he was like, well, hey, man, like, let's move this direction. So the
Hmm.
staff has been very, that part of it, people I think around here are like, hey, A plus.
Hmm.
They do love the staff. So, but again, like I said, you feel like you touched every role. You got Nolan, a young recruiter. You've got Danny Manning, a guy who's kind of an OG in the game, if you let me say.
Hmm.
And then Josh Jameson, who I mean, he was the director of ops at Oregon for years, and hiring him allowed us to up a lady, Stephanie DeBold, move her into the ops role, and she's been at Louisville for 20 some years now. So
Hmm.
it seemed to all kind of fall into place.
That's interesting. What has he gotten right thus far? Now that he's been on the job a couple months, what have you seen out of Kenny Payne that you think, okay, this is something that he has absolutely gotten right and hit a home run on?
Just this fan base is very much, you have to, I don't want to say, I guess, cater to them.
Yeah.
That, like
Oh,
the,
as a Tennessee guy, I know this all too well. Yeah, you
okay,
have to. Yeah.
see, I kind of compare like, okay, Tennessee football and Louisville
Mm.
basketball. It's kind of the
Yeah.
same, where they're at. And it's like in Louisville basketball, you have to cater to the fan base.
Mm.
You're a politician. I mean,
Yes.
you really are. And he has done. that's where Mack failed, and we can I can
Yeah.
mention that later too. But
Mm.
like Kenny Payne has done everything right, and again, like I said, he's got a little bit of a cheat code because he's
Mm.
a former player.
Yeah.
But I mean, even that, he's not taking that for granted. He has been out in front of the fans. They just did a question and answer with season ticket holders 2 days ago.
Mm.
They let fans just ask questions, just and the staff come out one by one. They ask them questions. Luke Hancock, former player, is the
Yeah.
one he hosted it. It's like that type of stuff. I thought he's done well because he's made the fans feel like it's their program again.
Hmm.
And for a guy who there's really no on the court, there's nothing yet. I mean, just started workouts yesterday.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to really say anything on the court. You can't mess up if you haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
But that part of it probably stands out as what he's really hit a home run, because he could have just come in and said, hey, I'm an alumni. I got the job. The fans love me. Now I can do my job. But he's made it a point to be out in the community. Yeah.
Well, then let's talk about Mac, because that is something that's just so fascinating to me, because obviously it ended horribly. There was that stuff with the assistant. Like, the Chris Mack experience had everything. But when he was hired, it's just funny when you go back and you read some pieces and like, oh, everyone was in on Chris Mack at Louisville. That was one of those things where you can't really fault Louisville, because it was just a great hire at the time. And it was like, okay, they're going to be fine. Yeah. And that's obviously not what happened. Chris Mack, the Chris Mack era did not go well at Louisville. But as someone on the ground and local and been around the program, what did Mack get wrong at Louisville?
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, like, I don't want to rewrite history. When we hired Chris Mack, it was pretty universal.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, no, this is the guy. It had been rumored for a few years that, like, hey, once Pitino's done, Tom Jurich kind of got his eye on Chris Mack, his ex guy. There was the joke, because it got said 1,000 times. You're like, well, his wife's family's from Louisville.
Yeah. And he's from like Ohio, which is obviously not far from Kentucky. So he's low. It's not a crazy cultural fit for him.
No, not at all. I mean, it seemed like the perfect fit. It really, even when he come in that first year, you have a middle of the road, feeling like talented roster, which that's something I think Louisville fans are good at looking at a roster and saying, okay, we can set realistic expectations for a team.
Yeah.
And enjoy a team that we're like, okay, this team's not a Final Four team. We know. You can watch this team and say they're not gonna make a run, but we can enjoy them for what they are. And here was that. You come right at you, beat Michigan State, you go to North Carolina, beat them by 28, 29, and then the second year you're the number one team in the country.
Yep.
You got top 10 class, and it felt like, hey, we're rolling. Then obviously the tournament gets canceled. It was like, number 2 seed in the ACC. Tournament gets canceled, and that's where the next year things got really weird.
Yeah.
Everything seemed fine, and then we have the COVID year, obviously, and the team is pretty good.
Are we talking about Chris Mack or Tom Crean at Georgia right now?
Right, exactly. Listen,
yes,
100%, man. I mean, that's a great comparison of how it kind of went, and it was like, that year gets a little hairy. There's obviously some things going on. Then after the season, almost immediately, it's like, wait a minute. And again, I told you before, this is an area where it's tough to keep things secret. I don't think Chris Mack wanted it out that he was letting the coaches go. It got out, and it's like, and in this state, if an entity from Lexington gets a hold of it or something, they're going to put it out there, just to like, sorry, and that's kind of what happened. And it was like, okay, now you have this issue. Regardless, you get rid of the coaches, then you've got the new coaches coming in, and then boom, you're like, wait a minute, Dino Gaudio extorted him, and now there's audio of this. I mean, I'm telling like a super long story, very, very short, Now, remember, Chase, the last 5 years or so, Louisville fans we have become lawyers. Like between you had the Katina Bow stuff, and then you move into the FBI stuff, and it's like, what? So now you've got this, and it's like we have an extortion, and it's like, man, we're tired of black eyes. Come on.
Yeah. We can only go into so many back rooms at restaurants looking for the next story.
Right. And that's what it started to feel like.
Yeah.
Come on. So then the year starts. The president gives him a six game suspension, which is for the whole month. And it just felt like from that point on, it was just bad.
Yeah.
Like real, like you could tell.
It was unsalvageable.
Yeah, you could tell when he came back. You're like,
Mm.
the coaching staff don't like each other. Something's going
Seems
on.
bad.
Yeah, it was just they were arguing on the sidelines, and that's when you have, again, referencing back to Tennessee football, with basketball, you have a lot of people that give a lot of money that are like, and we had some, I mean, you're talking some of your millions of dollar donors that were like, hey, publicly, we're out. Better change this. And then it was just mid-season, Louisville gave him an ultimatum. It's like, hey, if it come back a level 2, Louisville could fire him for free. That was in his contract. So Louisville worked it out with him and said, hey, you're owed $12 million. We'll give you 4. Go ahead and get out the door now. Or you can take a chance. And ultimately, I think it worked out for Louisville. And that was another thing Josh heard from the back. He orchestrated that because that was the time we were also, by the way, losing the AD. The president had just left. So it worked pretty seamlessly getting out, even though it was ugly, it was like, but the transition, but it's just kind of wild, man. I really thought he was the perfect guy, but I don't know how to say it, Chase, other than like, it's almost like he didn't realize what he was walking into. And I think there's probably a couple coaches that took the Tennessee football job that you can say, man, like, I don't think they realize, like, no, this isn't a joke, man. like you're the man here. I think that was his case, and it was almost too much. You could tell it was wearing him out. I mean, he looked like he was aging, like right before, as you're like, dude, I don't think you realized what this is. People, whatever you order at a restaurant.
This is not Xavier.
Yeah, it's not Xavier. People are going to go, wait a minute. He looked like he was mad at his kids when he was walking. We got a game tomorrow. Like it's that type of atmosphere. I mean, it's funny, but I think that's kind of where that one landed, man.
What do you think he does next?
I don't know. I think there's a real shot. Getting to know him a little bit while he's here, I think there's a real shot he's done.
Interesting.
He made it clear to many people that he was like, I'm not going to be one of those guys coaching till I'm 70.
Yeah.
Like, he's not. He's got 2 young girls. They're really good at volleyball. Pardon me. Just like, they're all American good at volleyball. There was a little rumor that maybe he was interested in Georgia when that popped open. I think his name come up from Missouri a little bit. Not necessarily from those schools.
Yeah.
Just, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an odd case. It's like I could see him coaching again, but I also don't think it's that far fetched to say he's just done. I mean,
it's impossible. Like Sean Miller's at Xavier now, and Thad Matta, who people said for years would never come back, he's back. I mean, it's probably one of those things where he's going to take some time and he's in no rush. Like in his early 50s, he's got, like you said, young kids where it's like, unless it's the perfect kind of job, he's like, I got my money. I'm good, man. Like, unless you throw the right opportunity at me, I'm not going to go be an assistant or any of that, because he's not doing media either, right? Like I haven't seen him.
He's got he's got his Twitter. He don't really talk about much. And let me be clear. Like, I think Mack's a good coach. I really, like, I if somebody hired him, I would be like, you're getting a good coach. I just don't think the fit at Louisville was right.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Yeah.
I also just wonder the COVID year, like what happens? Because they were a really good team that COVID year. And there are some programs where you're in year 2 and you've got this thing humming and then everything's canceled. And then obviously the bottom falls out. Crean was like that. Mack was like that. You just talked to a lot of college coaches about the year and a half, 2 years. Like if you were a new coach during that time period, you got really, really screwed in a lot of ways.
Louisville, I don't know how to say this without kind of making it a little political to an extent.
Yeah.
Louisville is a very progressive city in a conservative state. If I can say it like that. And Mac was more on the line of, I think he caught some flack from some of the fan base because he was very much in the camp of like, this is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like,
Yeah.
hey, he would publicly say, he was pretty public with, I don't understand why we're testing the way we are, why we're doing the stuff we're doing. So
There was
now
just a lot of non-culture fits there. It's just a
it was,
lot of stuff where it's just
yes,
it
yes,
wasn't going to work because Kenny Payne's not going to be like that. It's not going to happen.
100%. We had the stuff happen up in Louisville last year, or the year before last. There was a lot of
Mm,
protests, a lot of things going on. He was not going to talk about that. Whereas I think, whether you agree or disagree, it's like you almost have to say something.
right.
And he just was very much like, nope, no part of it. So at the end, it just, like you said, just culturally, everything, it just didn't work. Yeah, it just didn't work.
Well, we alluded to Milt Wagner, who has joined the fold at Louisville, a long time coming there. And I am so fascinated by this recruitment because, folks, if you are not familiar with what's going on between Louisville and Kentucky over the next year, it's everything you want in a college basketball story where Louisville hires Kenny Payne, a longtime Cal guy. You bring in Milt Wagner. That's one of his first big
Yeah.
things for a role that I'm not certain what exists. Is this a new role? Is this a new position? Because I read it and I was like, this sounds made up. I don't think this
It's
existed before. This is not an open position at
a little
Louisville.
bit of a babysitter, a little
Yeah.
bit of a babysitter. Yeah, it's kind of player relations. Even
Mm-hmm.
though I will say he is moving into a role that former card Reese Gaines was
Hmm.
in. Now Reese is a little more of a video guy.
Yeah.
Role a lot has to do with keeping alumni happy.
Mm-hmm.
Really, keeping former players happy, making sure they know that they're welcome, different things like that.
There you go. Well, it's interesting because DJ Wagner, because we're all getting old and time comes for us all, is
Yeah,
DeJuan Wagner now is a son who is the number one prospect for this upcoming class. And obviously, his father played for Cal at Memphis. So he's really cool with Cal.
yes.
And then Louisville, and you have Milt, who's obviously now working at Louisville,
Mm-hmm.
is his grandfather. So this young man is going to have to pick between his father
Yeah,
or his grandfather. And his dad has said, DeJuan has said that like he's not involved. It's his son. Like
yeah,
DJ can do whatever he wants to do, so he's not going to push him. But he's like, I'm also not going to lie. Like I'm close to Cal, and I'm sure DJ knows Cal really well. He knows Kenny probably really well too. Like, how do you see this playing out over the next year? Like, is this going to be like a really heated battle? Is this something that like it could get a little testy between Kenny and Cal because like they're going after the same dude and he's a program changer. Like this is a program changer kind of guy. Where are they at with both of those guys?
well, I don't think it'll play out over the year. uh,
Mm.
I think it'll be probably this summer.
Oh,
uh,
you think it's done this summer?
Something will happen this summer with him.
Interesting.
That's kind of, again, now that's not like a fact. That's just kind of
Mm.
the buzz around that recruitment is
Hmm.
like,
He wants to get it done.
I don't think he'll string either one of them along,
Hmm.
because he's going to one of the two schools. Everybody knows.
Yes.
Unless he decided to go play in the G League, which could be. If
Mm-hmm.
he goes to college, he's going to do that. You're right. It is so fascinating in the rivalry too,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously Kentucky fans were like, it was a no brainer. DJ Wagner,
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
everybody that you didn't care. Well, then the Kenny Payne thing happens. Immediately the Milt Wagner rumor starts.
Mm-hmm.
Then Milt Wagner's not named to the three.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a celebration on the Kentucky side. They're not hiring Milt all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Then Milt's name to the staff. Then the EYBL just happened up in Louisville.
Hmm.
You had an event up here, and
Yeah.
there was a couple games. One of them, DJ Wagner and his team played Bronny James and his team.
Mm-hmm.
There ended up being like 4,000 or 5,000 people that were there.
Yeah.
It was just
Is Bronny on Louisville's radar?
no, not.
Okay.
No, At least I've never heard his name for him. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, I don't.
He
I don't.
popped up on Tennessee's, and I was like, man, I don't like what those games would be like. Bronny James and TBA would just be an experience like no other. Like LeBron just courtside for Tennessee basketball games would just be a lot to take in. Like that's a lot to just wrap your head around.
It would be incredible. Yeah. No, I haven't heard his name, but DJ has a couple teammates too,
Yeah.
that Louisville's looking at. So it's, then there was a rumor that, hey, there's a world that Cal hires DeJuan.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of faded. So to your point, man, it's like weekly. It's the conversation. Like, it's anywhere you go. And to an extent, it is giving Kenny Payne a pass. And I know we'll get to this season, but
yeah,
giving Kenny Payne a pass to this season too, because everybody's like, hey, you get DJ Wagner. We're worried about, and I mean, Louisville don't even know if they're going to be able to play in the tournament this season. That's something we're waiting to hear. But yeah, it's something that's kind of ignited the rivalry again. Now, when Cal, even little things like when Cal offered Robert Dillingham, and there was kind of some rumor that Dillingham was going to pick Kentucky, Louisville fans were like, that's Cal bowing out. You're scared of the DJ Wagner thing. You don't want you don't want to end this battle anymore. But I do think it's going to be one that, like you said, it's going to be fascinating to watch, but it's one I don't think is going to go extremely long. Yeah, I think sooner than later, Wagner will make a pick. There's a pretty strong growing consensus that pick will be Louisville now.
Interesting.
Which
is it NIL related?
Not really. Not really. Now he will make a ton of NIL once he gets.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. What is where is Louisville at with NIL? Are they hit the ground running? You have a strong collective. What's the situation there?
They've done very well, especially on the football side.
Okay.
Coach Satterfield right now is Louisville sitting at number 6. Which, will fluctuate as other, as the SEC eats and some of the other schools get what they get. But it's going to probably finish in the top 15, top 20. One of the highest Louisville's ever gotten. On the Louisville just started a collective. I think it was just announced actually last week that's going to be going. But you have a lot of big money guys here in the city, and Louisville, again, much like Knoxville, it's the show.
Yeah.
It's the show here. You don't have other things to put it in. There's no NBA teams. There's no, the closest thing you got is the Bats, the red AAA team, there's a lot of money funnels into that program, and they've done, Louisville center, Sidney Curry. He has a brand new 2022 Jeep, they've got deals with Planet Fitness. It's been rumored that Malik Cunningham, the quarterback, is making, upwards towards a couple, I think $300,000-$400,000, in NIL. So it seems to be going well. They just haven't really been loud about it.
Yeah.
And then Kenny Payne steps in, and Kenny Payne has been very adamant in the transfer portal with, I like NIL, but if NIL is your first question, I'm not going to, which
a lot of coaches are like that.
Yes. Yeah. Which is odd, because that's kind of what, to be honest, Louisville fans were kind of like, this is why this killed us for years in Kentucky, because we would shout, we're like, wait a minute, something's going on over there. Are we not? And now it's like, you're kind of not that. So
yeah, that's the Jimbo Nick Saban thing, where it's like, no, Jimbo, Nick's complimenting you. That was like a whole misunderstanding that should never have happened, where Nick's saying we have to adapt because they are ahead of us now, and they are going to beat us in recruiting because they are ahead of us. It was not a shot. It was like, they're coming and they're ahead. So here's what we have to do to get ahead. There's a reason he said that, not in front of the media, but in front of a bunch of business leaders in Alabama. That is what that was. That's the dumbest argument from this summer. Oh my God.
Listen, no, 100%. And like I told you, the guy I do the show with from Clarksville, son Jalen Babe, we're big SEC football guys. We love some SEC football. There's always the joke up here for years. It's like, hey, we love SEC football. We're like, not what Kentucky and Vandy play. We love football, of course. Yeah. So we kind of always made that, but it's and this is kind of that type of war, up here. Like, hey, they're getting guys. We've lost a lot of games over the years to Kentucky where it was like, we might be just as good of a team, but they just got the one dude
Mm-hmm.
have, and now you want that to change and kind of bringing it all the way back around. DJ Wagner would kind of be the first shot that
Mm-hmm.
feel like, hey, we finally got him. Like we finally got one over on Cal. Like, no, this is our guy now. Now we're going to come in and we're going to take guys that you want, as opposed to it being the other way around. So you're right. Fascinating's the word, man. I mean, I don't know how long it'll go, but while it's going, if you say his name up here, the conversation stops and it goes to that.
So we're saying today, June 16th, DJ Wagner, you think he's a Cardinal?
I think so. I think
Okay.
right now, right now. So
I like it.
yeah.
There you go. Beating Kentucky, it's one of Rick Barnes' favorite, and maybe it'll be one of Kenny Payne's favorite things to do.
Rick Barnes is a very loved man in the city of Louisville. Trust me.
Is he really? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. That is that's one where anytime in rivalry fodder,
Mm-hmm.
Rick Barnes is brought up a lot. Where it's like, when it's we got Cal, we're like, hey, he's not even the best coach in the conference. So there's a lot of that because Rick Barnes he owns him a little bit of Calipari, so we enjoy that.
Yeah, anyone who doesn't like Rick Barnes, and it's like the whole thing where people were nervous of like when NIL was coming in of like, oh, is Rick Barnes at 67 going to adapt to NIL? And it's like, what's the whole thing where he's like, he's not going to lead with NIL, but he's
Yeah.
going to show, hey, Kennedy Chandler, first round pick, Keon
Yeah.
Johnson, first round pick. And he's just going to go up and down the list. He's like, I developed like Sakai Ziegler came in August. Like, I still don't understand how he enrolled when he enrolled and but he was there. He showed up. He did all that. And he's a good player. Like he's a player friendly guy, but he's also very, very honest and demanding and defense first. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of lazy takes about NIL over the next couple of years for a lot of different programs. And it's just not reality when you're invested in a program and you know these coaches and you know these players where no, they want to be told what's real. They want to be told how they're going to be used. They want to be told like, this leads us to Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, where he was not used in a way that he, I think, wants to be used. And
Sure.
Kenny Payne, I'm sure they have a plan, and they got together when he was in the portal of like, hey, this is how we'll use you versus how Barnes used you. That's not wrong. Like, that's just, he didn't see him that way, and he was not used that way. And that's okay because Tennessee will adapt and they'll move on and they wish him the best. And it's no bad blood. I don't think there's any negative hostility or anything or BHH feels lied to or anything like that.
Right.
It's just more of like it's not a schematic fit for what he wants to be as a player. And if you watch a lot of Tennessee basketball, what he wants to do is just not reality. Like that's just not going to be what Barnes is going to want from his bigs. He wants you at the rim. He wants you playing defense first. He wants you scaring dudes. He wants the Euros Plavsiches far more than the bigs who stretch the floor. It's just not his game. He would rather just go four guards and one big that he can count on, which is I think what they're going to do a lot this year.
Sure. Well, I mentioned Marcus Maben, who I do the show here. Louisville. He's a legend up here in Louisville from Clarksville. And
I think Jamie Chadwell's from Clarksville too, the coastal coach. Yeah.
Well, and Brandon was.
Yeah.
And Marcus knows Brandon's family really well. Tony, they're pretty close. And you're 100% right on that. Like, they love Tennessee. It was one of the things where him coming out of there, it was like, man, there is legitimately no beef at all with why I'm leaving. I just see myself as this. And of course, he had a meeting with Kenny Payne. There was a little thought about Auburn there, or a big thought, not a little thought. I think a lot of people thought, hey, because Bruce Pearl had a very close relationship with Brandon. So, but that's one man fans were really pumped about because it was one coming out. Now, and again, people do forget a little bit. Probably not you, but some people went Louisville side when you think about it. You're like, he was a reclass, he was a guy who was supposed to be in this class. He was a top 10 kid coming in, reclasses, goes to a place like Tennessee, who has some veteran bigs.
Yep.
And you think you're the man, and then you come in, and I think Brandon last year got a little dose of like, oh, there's some grown men out here that can play.
Yeah. Like he probably wouldn't have started again this year. And I'm sure that would, because Kama comes back, like Kama coming back, like I don't think he would have started. I think that was just, he got added to the super big lineup with him and Plavsic because of the injury. And I'm sure that's part of the conversation. Like there was no pathway to him playing immediately.
You're right. And I like him who, is looking to stretch a little bit, is looking at things. I think he sees himself in a different role.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, there is a spot for him here, and there is a path to start here.
Yeah.
Next to Sidney Curry, and I think that's probably what you're going to see with those two. Early reports of him have been very good.
Yeah. Are you worried about the spacing between those two starting and playing a lot of minutes together?
Not so much this season, because I think everybody this year is like kind of right now. We have not a 9-guy roster, like we're and scholarship. I'm sorry, let me say, a 9 scholarship, and it may there's still the Emoni Bates talk going on, so we'll see what happens with that. Honestly,
are they the favorites for Emoni?
They have been for a while.
Yeah.
Up until the last week, it's like, maybe there's some other things going on there. Kids like him, you just don't know. You're going to know when he shows up on a campus somewhere. You're going to say, oh, okay, we got him. But
that might be Carnell Tate over here with Ohio State and Tennessee over the next couple of days. It's just going to be, he's going to pop out and he might just say Notre Dame. I don't know.
You're right. And it's like, so I think fans are just in a holding pattern with that. But no, I don't think fans are as worried about that this year. I think if you look at it a couple years from now, maybe. But Kenny has been known to like 2 bigs.
Yeah.
So, it's a new brand, whereas we're coming off of Rick Pitino was very much give me one shot blocker, give me a really good shot blocker underneath, and then I don't care what else I put out there, outside of those 4 as far as bigs. Chris Mack was very much give me a big guy, put him underneath. We're going to 4 out this thing, and that's how we're going to do. Kenny Payne is a little more, give me a big and then give me a power forward that could play the center as well. So I don't know, interesting. That is more of a case study to us this year than I think an expectation with those two playing together.
I'm interested because obviously BHH has got all the talent in the world. Huge kid, like he's huge. But the touch, I don't know. I have questions about the shooting touch. I have questions. I watched a lot of stuff inside where I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And he has time to develop. And I just think he's in a better situation now. So for him personally.
Sure, I agree. And like I said, he's a Tennessee kid. He and the mom was clear about that. Like, hey man, we love Tennessee. It's one of those things. He had a connection with Kenny Payne at Kentucky. And a lot of people think he may have ended up at Kentucky, at Kenny Payne State at Kentucky. So, it would have been a battle there, obviously, between the two. But we're glad to have him and need him underneath.
Well, now that you mentioned BHH and Curry, I'm assuming those two probably going to start. Like, you can go ahead and pencil those two in as 2 starters, most likely.
You would think. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the growing kind of consensus.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the rest of the lineup? Who do you think is the 5-man? Do you think you still have to figure out with Bates, and that's going to kind of be a factor in how you fill out the rest of this lineup? But is there a 5-man lineup that you think Kenny Payne has right now that he would use the most?
I think there's a 4 for sure.
Okay.
The Bates would change some things. I think it comes in. L. Ellis is going to start at the point. Honestly, because right now, he's a guy people were excited about finishing the season last year, but also he's the only point guard.
Yeah.
So it's one of those deals where you're like, he's the guy. He'll start at the point guard. Kamari Lands, freshman, really turning a lot of heads in individuals, has been doing things. We talked to Sidney Curry on the air the other day, him and L. Ellis, and both of them were like separately, and both of them said, hey, Kamari Lands can play. He's a good kid. He's a top 40 kid, coming out of high school. He was committed to Syracuse for a while and then obviously committed to Louisville. So a lot of people really like him. I think he's probably in that role right now at the 2. With Emoni Bates not being here. Now, like I said, I'm going to operate like he's not. If he does, I think he would slide in there. But if not, it's going to be interesting to see how Kenny Payne does that. Louisville's not going to be a great shooting team this year.
Yeah.
So does he go for athlete? Does he take a guy like Jalen Withers and move Jalen Withers up and let him play on the wing a little bit? Does he take a guy like Mike James, who set out last year with an injury, who's a 4-star kid out of Orlando, and move him in there. I just don't know with that spot.
Hmm.
It's going to be more, how does he want to play? Because JJ Traynor can't play that spot. Rose Wheeler can't play that spot. So I think that it's really between those guys of who, again, like I said, barring you landing somebody else, even if it wasn't Emoni Bates, if they were to get a shooter or something that would come in there, I think that's probably the 4 set in stone. The question's going to be who wins that 5th spot.
Who else is in the portal how many more portal ads do you think they make before the season starts?
I think that they would like to add 2, but they're okay with rolling with what they have.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Kenny Payne said the other day to season ticket holders, he said, look, I'm just not, especially in year 1, he said, I'm just not going to add a guy to add a guy. There's really no sense in it. I mean, and I think he understands. It's kind of like he made the joke, he said Penny Hardaway called him, Mike Woodson called him. We're like, hey, let's set up a home and home. And we're in Maui this year, and the Maui's pretty tough this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every team outside of Louisville is getting top 25 votes, and there's 4 of them are going to be in the top 10. And it was like he said, he told them, not this year. Like, I'm going to push that off. We're going to push that off because I don't know how these kids are going to respond, and I'm not going to send them out to slaughter just to do it, because all these kids can come back. Everyone. So if I land a top class in 23, Louisville could be looking at another Chris Mack type scenario where, hey, year 2, top 10 team. So
it doesn't even really matter if you don't make the tournament this year. This is just kind of like a whole, like if you're banned from the tournament or anything like that. It doesn't. This is a year for it.
Yeah, this would be the year for it. I mean, obviously, if he makes the tournament this year, it's something that makes you cringe as a fan, especially, with Louisville basketball. You're like, making the tournament would be a success this year.
What do you think happens? Do you think they get the ban, or do you think they are?
I don't know. That's the $1 million question, man. I mean, they are meeting in LA tomorrow for the weekend.
Okay.
Saturday and Sunday, they're meeting in LA because we went the IRP route. Once that decision's down, we can't appeal that decision. So there's hope with it because of the NC State decision, because of obviously, NC State, they ended up not getting a ban. There's other conversations that the IRP and the NCAA have said they would like to punish the people involved a little more than the schools. But Louisville also has you were kind of on probation at the time. So, there's always that caveat in the back of your mind. You're like, well, things are kind of setting up where they wouldn't give Louisville a ban, but does that trump everything? And do they say, well, but we kind of have to, because I'll tell you, the attitude with Louisville fans right now on that is just, let's get it over with.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's missing the tournament in 16, pulling ourselves out of the tournament. It was like, I'm going to throw up. It was the worst.
It's
thing.
Not an Oklahoma State situation where you get Cade Cunningham for 1 year, and that's the year that you're not allowed to be in the tournament. Like, that's just crushing.
Right. And see, Louisville had just beaten UNC, number 1 team in the country, and then it was like the next day they're out.
Yeah.
And that felt like death to all of us, Now, since then, it's kind of crazy. It's one of those stats that people that aren't around Louisville don't realize, because I think Louisville's name, you just think Louisville basketball. Since 2015, that was the last time Louisville was in the second weekend of the tournament.
Oh, wow.
Since 2015, they've won 1 tournament game against Jacksonville State. Like, okay, for people outside of Louisville, you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Like,
yes.
Okay, for us, it's like, we've lived through this. We're like, God, I mean, March now, we've set out 3 marches. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just different things, a tournament ban. We had COVID hit, different stuff. And you're like, then we missed with the NIT. Then we lost in the first round to Minnesota. We lost in the second round to Michigan. And it's just like, Louisville fans are a little numb to it right now, where they're like, you know what? If you're going to give us a ban, do it. Let's get it over with. We can sit 1 more year out to move on.
Yeah.
So that it's a weird scenario. But there is hope that maybe they're like, hey, Louisville, you've been dealing with this for 5 years. 4.5 now. Maybe there's a little time served. So
There you go. We'll end on this. I'm okay with BHH moving on. Hey, Tennessee guy, here for it. What I'm not okay with, Steven, is what y'all did, the tampering and the monstrosity that was Tiyon Evans
Yeah.
moving on to Louisville, because
Yes.
that man was an absolute delight. Like, I was already printing the Baby Kamara t-shirts. I
Yeah.
was ready for this. Like, what he did against Mizzou is illegal in 7 states. I mean, super, super talented back. And I was just all in. I was telling folks, I'm like, oh, Tiyon Evans is like, this is happening. This JUCO kid who came in, like, he's really, really good. He's going to be just a dominant force. And then he just disappears late in the season. And I'm not sure what happened there, but ultimately he's gone. And then he pops up at Louisville. And I was just, I was devastated. I'm not gonna lie, Steven. It was brutal for me. Is he looking okay? Is my
Uh,
guy looking okay this summer?
yeah, I think he'll start.
Great. Love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I think he's one. And actually, Louisville's running back room is really good. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so what I kind of make that I say that so bluntly, but it's like
Mm.
it's actually a compliment because I mean
Yeah.
Louisville probably is going to come into the season with the third best running back stable in the conference. So
Hmm.
like, and for him, he come right in. And I know a couple football coaches kind of said off the record, but they won't mind. Don't worry about it. Uh,
Mm.
it's well, they were like, he was different.
Yeah.
They're like, when he walked in, you were like, this kid's different. And we were over
Mm.
workouts one day, and I mean, just his thighs, like how he worked out, you were like,
Yeah.
it was almost, not quite as big, but it
Mm.
reminded me of when Michael Dyer came
Yeah.
to Louisville, and everybody was like, God Almighty, that
Mm.
kid is insane. So yeah, there's a lot of high hopes for or Evans. And listen, Louisville cannot tamper because
Mm.
Scott Satterfield, after when you call out Nick Saban for
Yeah.
tampering, like you better not be tampering. So it's but people are excited about him, man. He looks like a heck of a player, and it's a year where Satterfield's he's got to win. He's got to win this year, man. It's
But see, the thing with that is, like, I just feel like it doesn't matter because, like, everything I've read, it's just he's the South Carolina thing. I think pissed a lot of people off, as you know. And I think once you got on the Chris Mack role, is what we call it now, where it just like it seems like it's not the right culture fit, and just it's not going to end well. Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech, where it was just clear that good coach, just not the right culture fit for that. Like, Satterfield can win 8 games, 9 games this year, and he's still just,
I
I
know.
don't, I think it's a year to year thing with him. I don't think the fan base is going to be all the way, unless he goes to a playoff. Like, that's probably it. It's like if he really fixes it and they're a playoff team or
Yeah,
something, or they win the ACC, then
sure.
it's like, all right, whatever, we're good with it and we'll move on. But I just don't see a path to that right now. So I don't know. It's very
No,
weird. I just don't think he's there long term.
no, I know. He's got this big recruiting class in, and to your
Mm-hmm.
point, locally, I mean, this class is insane. He's got the
Yeah.
number one running back in the
Yeah.
country on campus this weekend, and like you got a legit shot. And
Mm-hmm.
fans are still kind of
Yeah.
like,
That's a bad sign. And it's
well,
not an indictment on him. He's a
yeah,
good coach.
we'll see what he does this year. Kind of that kind of deal. So to your point, I don't disagree. I think that it's one where I've said it like this, and it's funny you use the reference
Mm.
on the air many times. I'm like, it just feels like a marriage that's not going to work,
Yeah.
but we're trying to make it work.
Yeah. And he's trying, you're trying, but at the end of the day, it's like it's just we're not long term compatible. And that's okay. Like, Satterfield will be fine wherever else he goes, like after this.
Oh,
I
sure,
think
absolutely.
he's a good coach. But we'll see. We'll see. Steven, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over there at ESPN Louisville this week?
Oh man, listen, this week, obviously, we're coming up on a huge, I mentioned it just a second ago, a
Mm.
huge football recruiting weekend.
Mm.
Have our guy Pierce Clarkson, the quarterback, committed. I think there's 13, 14 4-star players, 2 5-star players. And I know that, I mean, listen, they're pulling out Churchill Downs this weekend.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah, they're doing it up big for them. They're like, hey, listen, sweet night races. That's all eyes are kind of on that. And a little nugget, Pierce Clarkson, the quarterback commit, said probably a month and a half ago, he said, hey, that big recruiting weekend on the 17th of June, he said there's also going to be basketball commitment news.
Mm.
And that's kind of been a conversation too. Hey, is something going to happen this weekend with basketball? So Right now, man, it is 100% for this week alone. Recruiting, and are we going to get guards? That's the two questions, So that's where we're at right now in Louisville, man.
There you go. Steven, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you making the time, man. We'll have to check back in again soon.
Please, anytime, man. I had a blast.